I paid for the most expensive cruise of our lives, and he took his mistress in my place. That night in Busan, when the truth hit me like an unexpected storm, eu entendi que o amor pode ser uma arma, and that I needed to learn how to shoot, but not at him, at the version of myself that accepted crumbs and called them a feast, at the woman who stayed silent when she should have screamed, at the part of me that believed love meant sacrifice, even when the sacrifice was myself. Before I continue telling you this story, I need to ask you something. If you've ever felt this kind of pain, that feeling that the ground disappeared beneath your feet, that you were the last person to know your own story, that everyone around you knew the truth except you, leave a like and subscribe to the channel, because I want more people to know they're not alone. That pain can be transformed into something powerful. That betrayal, as devastating as it is, doesn't have to be the end of your story, and that starting over, even when it seems impossible, is the greatest proof of courage that exists. This isn't just my story. It's the story of every woman who's ever been made to feel small by someone who promised to make her feel whole. I lived in a small apartment near the port of Busan, where the smell of salt impregnated the curtains and the sound of seagulls woke me every morning. It was a simple place, but it was ours, or at least I believed that. The white walls held photos of moments I thought were real, smiles, hugs, promises whispered on winter nights when the world outside was cold but we were warm together. I looked at those images and felt that, despite everything, despite the growing distance between us, despite the conversations that had become shallow and the touches that had become mechanical, it was still worth believing. Outside, the port bustled with life from dawn until dusk. Fishing boats arrived at sunrise, bringing the smell of fresh fish and the shouts of vendors at the market who had been working these same stalls for generations. I loved walking there on weekends, feeling the cold sea wind hit my face, watching families laughing together, couples walking hand in hand, old men playing Jengi on makeshift boards. And I always thought, one day, we'll be like that again. One day, we'll rediscover what we lost. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old building with narrow stairs and peeling paint. But from our window, we had a perfect view of the harbor. On clear mornings, I could see all the way to Yeongdo Island, the bridge connecting it to the mainland, like a ribbon of concrete and steel. At night, the lights from the ships reflected on the water, creating patterns that danced with the waves. I used to stand at that window for hours, coffee cup warming my hands, watching the world move while I felt stuck in place. My husband, Jun-ho, was the kind of man who knew how to smile calmly and lie the same way. He had that tranquil, almost poetic way of speaking that made everything sound reasonable, even when it wasn't. He worked at a consulting firm, or at least that's what he said. The details of his job were always vague, always shifting. Some days he worked with international clients, other days with local businesses. Some weeks he traveled constantly, other weeks he barely left the office. I stopped asking questions because the answers never quite added up, and asking made me feel like I was being paranoid, controlling, the kind of wife no man wants. He wore suits during the week, came home late, always tired, always with excuses on the tip of his tongue. Traffic was terrible. The client meeting ran long. His boss needed him to stay late to finish a proposal. When he got home, I'd make ginger tea the way his mother taught me, and sit beside him on the couch, trying to guess what was going through his mind. But he never said, never really said. He'd just sit there, scrolling through his phone, occasionally laughing at something I couldn't see, living a life I wasn't part of even though we shared the same space. I believed every word he said, like someone clinging to the last lifeboat in the middle of the ocean. Because deep down, I didn't want to see the obvious. I didn't want to be that woman, the suspicious wife, the jealous partner, the insecure person who questions everything. I wanted love to be enough, for my dedication to be enough, for me to be enough. I wanted to believe that if I just tried harder, loved more, asked for less, everything would go back to how it was in the beginning. But back then, I still didn't know that being in love doesn't mean being blind. It means choosing not to see, and that choice has a price that comes due eventually, always when you're least prepared to pay it. The apartment had large windows that faced the sea. On clear days, I could see the ships coming and going, carrying dreams and people to distant places I'd only seen in photographs. I used to stand there in the mornings, coffee cup in hand, imagining what it would be like to board one of those ships and simply disappear, to leave behind the routine, the silent dinners where we ate without speaking, The nights when I slept alone even though he was lying right next to me. The feeling that I was slowly becoming invisible in my own life. Our neighborhood was quiet, residential, the kind of place where nothing dramatic ever seemed to happen. Old ladies selling fish on street corners, their weathered hands expertly gutting and cleaning their catches. Children playing soccer in the narrow alleys, their laughter echoing off the concrete walls. The smell of kimchi fermenting in clay pots on balconies, mixing with the salt air from the sea. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where secrets were hard to keep because someone was always watching, always noticing. But somehow, Junho managed to keep his. Or maybe people noticed and just didn't tell me. Maybe I was the fool everyone pitied but no one warned. I remember the early days of our relationship with a mixture of nostalgia and pain, like pressing on a bruise just to feel something. We met 5 years ago at a cafe near the university, one of those trendy places with exposed brick walls and baristas who took their coffee seriously. I was studying business administration, working part-time at a cosmetics store to pay for my courses, living on instant noodles and ambition. He walked in one rainy afternoon, shaking water from his umbrella, and our eyes met across the crowded room. He smiled, and I was lost. He had that mysterious charm, that way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room even when it was packed with people. He talked about his dreams of traveling the world, of building something meaningful with his career, of finding someone to share it all with. And foolishly, beautifully, naively, I thought that someone was me. I thought I had won some kind of lottery, that the universe had brought us together for a reason. The courtship was like something from a romantic movie. He'd show up at the cosmetics store with my favorite tea from the cafe where we met. He'd leave little notes in my textbooks when I wasn't looking. We'd take the train to Seoul just to walk around Myeongdong, eating street food and laughing at inside jokes. He made me feel seen in a way I'd never felt before. Special, chosen, loved. We got married after dating for 2 years. It was a small ceremony, just family and close friends, at a traditional hanok in the countryside. I wore my grandmother's hanbok, the silk smooth and cool against my skin. Junho cried when he saw me walk in, and I thought those were tears of joy and love. Now I wonder if they were tears of guilt, some part of him knowing he wasn't capable of being the husband I deserved. I worked for 6 long months to save the money for that cruise. 6 months of extra shifts at the cosmetics store where I had worked my way up to manager, staying late to do inventory, coming in early to train new employees. 6 months of cutting back on groceries, buying the cheaper brands, skipping meals sometimes so I could save more. 6 months of giving up new clothes, nights out with friends, small luxuries that make life lighter and more bearable. Every cent saved was a promise of renewal, a brick in building a future I believed would be ours. I kept the money in a separate account, watching the balance grow slowly but steadily. Some weeks I could only add a few thousand won. Other weeks, when I worked overtime or got a commission bonus, I could add more. I had a goal written on a sticky note attached to my bathroom mirror. W3 500,000. The cost of the cruise, minus the deposit I'd already put down. Every morning I'd look at that number and feel motivated. This trip would save us. This trip would remind us why we fell in love. I wanted that trip to be our redemption. The moment when we'd return to what we were before the fight started, before the exhaustion set in, before the silence that hurt more than any argument ever could. I remembered when we first met, when everything was easy and light and full of possibility, when he'd look at me like I hung the moon, when my opinions mattered, when he actually listened to what I had to say. In the first years of our marriage, everything was manageable. We had our routines. Friday nights were for trying new restaurants in different neighborhoods of Busan. Saturday mornings, we'd walk on the beach at Gwangali, sometimes dipping our toes in the cold water, sometimes just sitting on the sand and talking about everything and nothing. Sunday evenings, we'd cook together, him chopping vegetables while I prepared the meat, working in harmony like we'd been doing it for decades. But gradually, so gradually I didn't notice, until it was too late. The brightness faded. Conversations became shallow, just logistics and schedules. What time will you be home? Did you pay the electric bill? We're out of laundry detergent. Touches became mechanical, perfunctory. A peck on the cheek in the morning, a pat on the shoulder when passing in the hallway. The casual intimacy of long-term relationships, except without any real intimacy at all. And I, desperate to hold on to what was slipping away like water through my fingers, started trying harder, being more understanding when he came home late, more patient when he snapped at me for no reason, more willing to shoulder all the household responsibilities while he focused on his career. I became smaller and smaller, taking up less space, asking for less attention, needing less acknowledgement, until I felt like a ghost in my own life. I even dreamed about that trip, vivid dreams that felt more real than my waking life. I dreamed of the two of us holding hands on the deck, watching the sunset over the ocean, the sky painted in impossible shades of pink and gold. I dreamed of us laughing at silly things again, rediscovering the lightness of being together, remembering why we chose each other in the first place. I thought that, away from routine and pressure and the weight of everyday life, away from the apartment that had started to feel like a prison, we could find each other again. We could become us again. The cruise was supposed to be perfect, the answer to all our problems. 7 days sailing through some of Asia's most beautiful destinations. 7 days away from everything that had gone wrong. First stop, Jeju Island. With its volcanic landscapes and orange groves and the famous stone grandfather statues that were supposed to bring good luck. Then Fukuoka in Japan, with its ancient temples and cherry blossoms and streets that smelled like ramen and incense. And finally, Osaka, with its neon lights and vibrant energy and the famous Dotonbori district where you could eat your way through heaven. I had researched every port, every possible excursion, every restaurant we could visit. I made lists in a special notebook, printed itineraries and maps, imagined every moment in careful detail. I even bought a new camera, spending money I really couldn't spare, because I wanted to capture everything. I wanted proof that we could still be happy together. I wanted photographs I could look at years from now and remember this as the moment we turned everything around. When I finally bought the tickets, a 7-day cruise that passed through Jeju, Fukuoka, and Osaka, departing from Busan Port, I showed him with a smile so big it hurt my cheeks, my whole face aching with the effort of containing my joy. It was a Friday night in early March. He had just gotten home from work, was taking off his jacket and loosening his tie when I opened the laptop on the kitchen table, unable to wait another second to share my surprise. "Look at this," I said, my voice trembling with excitement, with hope, with desperate love. He looked at the screen, read the details of the trip, and smiled too. But there was something in his eyes, a gleam that wasn't for me, a distance that made my stomach clench even though I didn't want to acknowledge it. It was as if he was looking through me, seeing something else, another place, another person, like I was a transparent obstacle between him and what he really wanted. "That's cool," he said, without emotion, without the enthusiasm I'd hoped for, needed, was counting on. "When is it?" "In 3 weeks. I've been saving for months. It's all paid for. We just need to pack." I reached for his hand, squeezed it, tried to transmit through touch what I couldn't quite put into words. "Please, please see me. Please care. Please try." He nodded, gave me a quick kiss on the forehead, the kind of kiss you give a child or a pet, and went to the bedroom without another word. I stayed there, alone in the kitchen, feeling the enthusiasm drain from my chest, like air leaking from a punctured balloon, leaving me hollow and deflated. I sat at the table for a long time after that, staring at the cruise details on the screen, trying to convince myself his reaction was just tiredness, just stress, just anything other than indifference. I should have noticed. But the truth is, we don't want to see what hurts too much. We make excuses. We rationalize. We tell ourselves stories that make the truth more bearable, even when those stories are lies. Over the following days, I threw myself into preparations with almost manic energy, as if my enthusiasm could compensate for his lack of it. I bought new clothes for the trip, a white linen dress for the formal dinner on the ship, comfortable sandals for walking through temple grounds, a wide-brimmed hat to protect from the sun, a swimsuit I'd never wear because I was too self-conscious but bought anyway out of hope. I researched the best restaurants at each port, booked spa treatments on the ship, even bought a waterproof phone case so I could take pictures by the pool. But Junho seemed distant, more distant than usual, like he was pulling away even while standing next to me. When I talked about the trip, he just nodded absently, eyes glued to his phone, thumbs moving rapidly across the screen. When I asked if he was excited, he said yes, but his voice carried no conviction, no warmth, nothing that suggested he actually meant it. And I, wrapped in my own enthusiasm and desperate hope, chose not to see the signs that were screaming in my face, waving red flags I deliberately ignored. I also noticed the small things, though I didn't let myself think too much about what they meant. The way he'd shower immediately when he got home, scrubbing away any evidence of wherever he'd been. The way he'd put his phone face down on every surface, screen always hidden. The way he'd started working out suddenly, going to the gym 4 times a week when he'd never cared about fitness before, suddenly concerned with his appearance in a way he hadn't been in years. New clothes appearing in his closet that I didn't buy, a different cologne that smelled expensive and unfamiliar. One evening, while he was in the shower, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. I glanced at it casually, no intention of snooping, just a reflexive look toward the sound. A message preview appeared on the lock screen. Can't stop thinking about last night. My heart stopped. My hands trembled as I picked up the phone. This device that suddenly felt like evidence of a crime. I tried his old password, our anniversary date, the numbers he'd used for everything for years. It didn't work. He had changed it. Of course he had. Guilty people always change their passwords. I set the phone down carefully, exactly as it had been, making sure the angle was right, that he wouldn't know I'd touched it. Then I walked to the kitchen on shaking legs and gripped the edge of the counter, breathing deeply, trying not to vomit, trying not to scream, trying not to fall apart right there on the tile floor. But I didn't confront him. Not yet. I needed more time to prepare, to think, to plan. I needed to be smart about this, not emotional. Because emotional women are dismissed, ignored, gaslit into thinking they're crazy. I needed evidence. I needed a strategy. I needed to protect myself before I went to war. One day before the trip, he came home with that expression I knew so well, the expression of someone about to disappoint, but would make it seem inevitable, make it seem like circumstances beyond his control, make it seem like anything other than a choice. He sat at the kitchen table, ran his hand through his hair in that practiced gesture that usually made me soften, and let out a long, theatrical sigh designed to elicit sympathy. "Honey, something came up at work," he said, with that tone of calculated regret that I'd heard too many times to count. "The company called me for an urgent meeting. It's about the new project with the Tokyo branch. Major clients, big contract, huge opportunity. I can't miss it. If I miss it, I might lose the promotion I've been working toward." My heart tightened. I felt tears burn in my eyes, hot and humiliating, but I forced a smile, forced my voice to stay level and understanding because that's what good wives do. They understand. They sacrifice. They swallow their disappointment and smile. "It's okay," I replied, with the voice as firm as I could manage, though it cracked slightly on the second word. "We'll reschedule. These things happen. Work is important." He approached, held my face with both hands, forcing me to look into his eyes, and I saw something there I couldn't quite identify. Guilt? Relief? Anticipation? "You're incredible," he said, kissing my forehead like I was a child being praised for good behavior. "You understand me better than anyone. I love you," and I believed, because it was easier to believe than face the truth that was already pulsing, muted but insistent, in the depths of my chest like a second heartbeat. That night, I made ramen for him, his favorite, with soft-boiled egg and scallions and just the right amount of spice, packed his suitcase carefully, folded each piece of clothing as if they were small pieces of my love. I separated the shirts he liked most, the ones that made his shoulders look broader. I put in the perfume I had given him for his birthday, expensive stuff I couldn't afford but bought anyway. I even wrote a note wishing him good luck at the meeting, words of encouragement and support and love on cheerful yellow paper. I kissed his face, wished him luck, stood in the doorway waving as he walked down the stairs with the suitcase I packed. He left through the door with my love carefully folded inside, and I stood there alone, hearing the sound of waves hitting the pier, a sound that seemed to mock me now, rhythmic and relentless, as if the sea knew something I still refused to see. Little did I know that would be the last time I'd see him as my husband in any meaningful sense, the last time I'd believe any word that came out of his mouth, the last time I'd be that woman, the trusting one, the loving one, the foolish one who thought dedication and sacrifice would be enough. I spent that night alone in the apartment, trying to convince myself that everything would be fine, that this was just a minor setback, that we'd reschedule and the trip would be even better after we'd both had more time to prepare, that the trip could be rescheduled, that work really was important, that I was being understanding, mature, the perfect wife every man supposedly wants. But in the silence of that night, with only the sound of waves and seagulls outside, with the empty apartment feeling bigger and colder than it should, a small voice inside me whispered something I didn't want to hear, something I'd been ignoring for months. "He's lying." I ignored it, pushed it down, buried it under layers of justifications and rationalizations and desperate hope. because accepting the truth would mean accepting that the last 5 years of my life had been based on a lie, that the man I loved didn't exist, had never existed, was just a character he played when it suited him. And I wasn't ready for that yet. I wasn't ready to lose everything I'd built, everything I'd believed in, everything I'd sacrificed for. 3 days later, I was at work when my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a slow, rainy afternoon, the kind where time moves like honey. I was organizing new skincare products in the display case, arranging bottles by size and color, losing myself in the mindless task, when I saw the notification light up my screen. A message from Minji, a friend who lived in Seoul, someone I hadn't heard from in weeks. She had sent me a photo with a single sentence. "I'm so sorry, but I thought you needed to know." My heart raced, pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Something about the tone of her message, the apologetic preface, filled me with immediate dread. My hands shook as I opened the image, and the world stopped spinning. Junho was on the deck of a ship, the same ship I paid for, the exact ship I'd researched for hours, comparing cabins and amenities and reviews. The sky behind him was impeccable, cloudless, impossibly blue, the sea shining like a perfect postcard, like a travel advertisement, like a dream. And beside him, her, the woman I had seen a few times on his social media, always with comments too neutral, too careful, smiles too ambiguous. The woman whose name came up occasionally in his stories about work, always in passing, always explained away. The woman of deleted messages and strange phone calls and threadbare excuses that should have been obvious. They were toasting with champagne glasses, the golden liquid catching the sunlight. The sun's reflection hit them in an almost cruel way, like the universe itself was spotlighting their betrayal, making sure I couldn't miss a single detail. She wore a red dress that danced in the wind, expensive looking, the kind of dress I'd never buy for myself because what was the point? He had that smile, the smile I thought was only mine, the smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years. I felt the phone slip from my hands. It fell to the floor with a dull thud that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet store. Someone at work, Jiwon, I think, one of the newer employees, asked if I was okay, but I couldn't answer. I couldn't breathe. The air had disappeared from the room. My heart stopped and started and stopped again. The walls tilted. Everything I was, everything I believed, everything I'd built my life around, collapsed. I picked up the phone from the floor with trembling hands. I zoomed in on the photo, torturing myself with details, unable to look away, and I noticed everything, every small thing that destroyed me even more. The wedding ring he wasn't wearing, the one I'd saved for months to buy, the way she leaned against him, comfortable and possessive, the intimacy in their gestures, the body language of two people who knew each other well, who'd touched each other in ways I didn't want to imagine, the matching cocktails on the table in front of them, the sunset in the background, the exact same sunset I had imagined watching with him, the same view from the same deck of the same ship I'd paid for. This wasn't recent. This wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness or any of the other euphemisms people use for betrayal. This had been going on for a while. This was established. This was a relationship. But I didn't cry right there in the store. I didn't scream or throw things or make a scene. I just stood there, staring at the screen until the brightness faded, and my face reflected back at me in the black mirror, until my own eyes looking back seemed like a stranger's. And it was there, in that cutting silence, surrounded by beauty products promising transformation and renewal, that I understood with perfect clarity. Love was over, but my lucidity had just been born. I looked at that photo for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes that stretched elastic and endless. My coworkers gave me space, sensing something was wrong, whispering among themselves but not approaching. I was grateful for their distance. I noticed everything with terrible precision. The way his hand rested on her waist, possessive and comfortable, the casual ownership of that gesture, the matching cocktails on the table in front of them, probably something fruity and expensive from the ship's premium bar, the kind of drinks I'd fantasized about ordering while I saved money by bringing instant noodles for lunch, the sunset in the background, the same sunset I had imagined watching with him, except now it was tainted, ruined, transformed from romantic to obscene. I zoomed in on her face, driven by some masochistic need to know everything. She was beautiful, I had to admit, beautiful in a way that made me hate myself for not being enough. Younger than me, maybe 25 or 26, with that fresh beauty that hasn't been worn down by years of disappointment. Long black hair that fell in perfect waves over her shoulders, the kind of hair that looks good without effort. Designer sunglasses perched on her head, probably real Gucci or Chanel, not knockoffs from the market. A confidence in her smile that spoke of someone who had won, who had taken what she wanted without any remorse or second thoughts. And Junho, he looked happy, genuinely, radiantly happy, more relaxed and joyful than I'd seen him in years, maybe ever. It was the kind of happiness that can't be faked, that radiates from deep inside, that transforms a face completely. And that realization hurt more than anything else, more than the betrayal itself, because it meant that what we had, what I thought we had, what I'd sacrificed everything for, had never made him feel that way. I had never made him feel that way. Minji sent another message, and I watched the words appear on my screen like a death sentence. I'm on this cruise with my boyfriend. We're celebrating our anniversary. I saw them yesterday at dinner too, at the captain's table. They're sharing a cabin. They introduced themselves as a couple. I'm so sorry. I didn't know whether to tell you, but I couldn't keep this from you. You deserve to know. Sharing a cabin, the cabin I had booked 6 months ago, comparing different options, finally splurging on the one with the ocean view and the king-size bed and the private balcony. The cabin where I had imagined we'd make love under the stars, reconnect, fall in love all over again like young people in movies. Instead, he was there with her, living my dream with another woman, using my money, my planning, my hope, taking everything I'd worked for and giving it to someone else like it meant nothing. That night, I went home and sat on the living room floor because standing seemed impossible and the couch seemed too normal, too associated with the life I'd been living, that suddenly felt like an elaborate lie. The lights were off. Only the cold moonlight came through the window, drawing long shadows on the walls that looked like reaching hands or watching figures. I looked at every corner of that apartment and realized with devastating clarity how much I had lost myself trying to hold on to someone who had already let go of my hand, who had probably never held it as tightly as I held his. I remembered all the times he came home late, smelling of perfume that wasn't mine, floral and expensive and wrong. All the times I asked about it and he made me feel paranoid, dramatic, crazy, insecure, the kind of woman men leave. All the times I asked for attention, and he gave me excuses wrapped in impatience and barely concealed contempt. All the nights I slept alone while he stayed up late on his phone, laughing softly at messages I never saw, living a secret life inches away from me. I remembered the time I found an earring in his car, a small silver hoop that definitely wasn't mine, and he said without hesitation that it belonged to a coworker who had asked for a ride. His explanation was so smooth, so practiced, that I believed him immediately, even felt guilty for suspecting. The time he deleted his phone history and said it was to free up memory, like I was stupid enough to believe phones work that way. The time he changed his email password and said it was for security after reading an article about hacking, another smooth lie I swallowed whole. The time I suggested marriage counseling, and he laughed, actually laughed, and said we didn't have any real problems, that I was just stressed from work, that I was being dramatic and overly emotional, that I needed to relax. The time I asked if he still loved me, and he said of course without looking up from his phone. Those 2 words delivered with less emotion than if I'd asked him about the weather. And there, on that cold floor, feeling the weight of truth crushing me like physical pressure on my chest, making it hard to breathe, I made a decision. I wasn't going to destroy myself because of him. I wasn't going to beg or plead or try to win him back. I wasn't going to diminish myself further, trying to understand what I did wrong, or how I could be better. Pain would become strategy. Love would become lucidity. Heartbreak would become power. And the woman he despised, the woman he'd discarded so easily, would become the strongest person he had ever known. But that night I still cried. I cried everything I had held back for months, years maybe, all the disappointments and small betrayals and moments of feeling unseen. I cried for the woman I was, the one who believed love conquered all, for lost innocence and shattered dreams, and the future I'd imagined that would never exist. I cried until my throat was raw, and my eyes were swollen, and I had no tears left, until I was empty and exhausted and purged. And when I had no more tears, when I was completely wrung out, I got up from the floor, washed my face in cold water until my skin felt numb, and started planning. Because tears alone wouldn't save me. Emotion alone wouldn't protect me. I needed strategy. I needed to be smarter than him. I needed to win. In the following days, pain became calculation. Heartbreak became focus. I didn't tell anyone anything at first. Didn't post passive-aggressive messages on social media or cryptic quotes about betrayal. Didn't call a friend crying or run to my mother's house for comfort. I just started planning, methodically and carefully, like someone assembling a complicated puzzle where every piece had to fit perfectly, piece by piece, step by step. I called my lawyer, Mr. Park, discreetly from a coffee shop far from my neighborhood where no one would recognize me. I asked for advice about property division, asset protection, what rights I had as a spouse. He was a middle-aged man with kind eyes but a sharp mind, someone who had seen 1,000 stories like mine and knew exactly how they typically ended. "Everything you're doing is legal," he said during our second meeting, held in his small office that smelled like old books and strong coffee. "The house is in your name. You have every right to transfer it. But I need to ask, are you absolutely sure about this? Once you start this process, once you take these steps, there's no going back. Divorce is final." "I'm sure," I replied, without hesitation, with more certainty than I'd felt about anything in years. He nodded slowly, studying my face with the careful assessment of someone who knows when a client is truly ready. "Good. Because in situations like this, in cases of infidelity and betrayal, the person who strikes first usually comes out ahead. Document everything. Keep records of all expenses, all contributions to the household, screenshots of messages if you can get them, photos if possible. If he tries to claim he's entitled to anything, we need proof otherwise. We need to show that you built this life, that you paid for everything, that he contributed nothing but lies." I left his office feeling lighter, more empowered, more in control than I had in months. For the first time since seeing that photo, I felt like I had agency, like I wasn't just a victim of circumstances, but an active participant in my own life. I had a plan. I had next steps. I had purpose beyond heartbreak. I went to the registry office and transferred the house documents, which were in my name because I was the one who put down the deposit. I was the one who paid every single monthly installment for 3 years while he invested in schemes and ventures that never materialized, to my mother's name. The clerk barely looked up as she processed the paperwork, just another transaction in her day, not understanding she was processing my liberation. No drama, no warning, no confrontation. Just the cold efficiency of someone who understood that you don't defeat the enemy with tears and emotional outbursts, but with intelligence and strategy and ruthless practicality. I opened a separate bank account at a different bank, one he didn't know about, and started transferring my salary there. Every one I earned went into that account, building my escape fund, my independence fund, my freedom fund. I removed my name from all joint accounts we had, quietly, without fanfare. I archived every message I could find, every photo that seemed suspicious, every credit card statement that showed restaurants I'd never been to or purchases I didn't recognize. I took screenshots of everything, backed them up to the cloud, printed hard copies that I stored at my mother's house. I built my case in silence, meticulously and methodically, like someone preparing an invisible fortress, gathering weapons he didn't know existed, planning a battle he didn't know was coming. And I continued life normally, wearing a mask of normalcy that felt surreal. I went to work, smiled at customers, trained new employees. I came home and cleaned the apartment, did laundry, cooked meals. I responded to his messages from the cruise as if nothing had happened, as if I didn't know, as if I was still that trusting wife patiently waiting for her husband to return. Because I knew that if he suspected anything, if he had even the slightest hint that I knew his secret, I would lose the element of surprise. And surprise, in this game, was everything. Surprise was my only advantage. The cheater always expects confrontation, expects tears and accusations. They never expect silence. They never expect strategy. When Junho returned from the cruise 7 days later, he came home tanned and rested, looking younger somehow, with that smile of someone who had just lived the best week of their life, just not with me, not with the person who made it possible. He brought souvenirs, as if cheap gifts could paper over betrayal. A keychain from Jeju shaped like a harubang, those volcanic rock grandfather statues that are supposed to bring fertility and protection. A small bottle of tangerine liquor, the local specialty. A refrigerator magnet with a landscape of Fukuoka, cherry blossoms and ancient temples. Cheap tourist trinkets, the kind you buy at the last minute in airport shops. as if they could fill the hole he had dug in my chest. "I missed you so much," he said, pulling me into a hug, and I could smell it. That sweet, floral perfume clinging to his shirt, different from my subtle jasmine scent. Her perfume, evidence of her body against his. I smiled, the same smile I'd been practicing in the mirror, except mine came with a plan. Mine came with knowledge. Mine came with power he couldn't see. I accepted the gifts, thanked him warmly, even arranged them carefully on the shelf like they mattered. I made samgyeopsal for dinner, the grilled pork belly he loved, perfectly cooked with fresh lettuce and ssamjang sauce. I pretended to be interested in the stories he made up about meetings and contracts and difficult clients, about the hotel where he supposedly stayed, describing details he'd clearly researched online, about the demanding Japanese executives and the long negotiation sessions and the cultural differences he had to navigate. Every word that came out of his mouth gave me more certainty that I was doing the right thing. Every lie, every smooth fabrication, every carefully constructed story showed me exactly who he was. Someone who could look me in the eyes and lie without flinching. Someone who could use my money to betray me and then come home and accept my care as if it were his due, because he didn't feel guilty. He felt comfortable. The comfort of knowing I would always be there, waiting, believing, forgiving, accepting. The comfort of having a wife who took care of the house and paid the bills while he lived his secret life, his real life, the life that didn't include me except as a convenience. But that version of me no longer existed. That woman was dead, and in her place was someone he'd never met, someone he couldn't manipulate, someone who was done being small. As we ate dinner that night, I watched him carefully, cataloging details. He had a new watch, expensive by the looks of it, probably Tag Heuer or Omega. When I asked about it, he said without hesitation that it was a gift from the company for closing a major deal. But I noticed how he touched it, stroked it, admired it, the way someone touches a gift from a lover, not a corporate bonus. "Tell me more about the trip," I said, pouring him more soju, the cheap kind he claimed to dislike but drank anyway. What was the best part? He paused, just for a second, before launching into another fabricated story. But in that pause, I saw everything I needed to see. The fear of being caught, the mental calculation of what he could and couldn't say, the practiced ease of a habitual liar constructing another careful fiction. "The best part was probably closing the deal," he said finally. "It means a lot for my career, for our future. Our future." The words hung in the air, hollow and meaningless and almost funny in their absurdity. What future? The future where he continued lying? The future where I continued pretending to believe him? That future was already over. He just didn't know it yet.